Welcome to the new podcast, Cancer Simplified. My name is Duncan Darrow, and I will be the host for this program. I'm the founder of Fighting Chance, and for 22 years I've run the charity, which is the East End's only free cancer counseling center. At our clinic in Sag Harbor, we have a staff that has included oncology social workers and clinical psychologists. They have provided over 5,000 free counseling sessions to East End cancer patients who feel the disease is eroding their mental health and their emotional well-being. The goal of our podcast, sort of like our free counseling, is to simplify what cancer is all about so that the disease will be easier for patients and caregivers to understand, not to mention the general public. In most circumstances, the medical experts who are available locally at Stony Brook Medicine can provide the highest standard of care, but there are a few times, really just a few, when patients must travel to specialized treatments in New York City cancer centers. Last year with our partner Hampton Jitney, we provided this transportation in many cases. And so with that, let's just get started. Hello, this is Duncan Darrow again. I'm the host of Cancer Simplified, a new podcast for the East End. And today we're going to talk about the topic of early detection in a technical way and also in a very human way. Technically, early detection is about different kinds of procedures, instruments, what have you, that have an uncanny ability to detect cancer at a much earlier stage than it would be ordinarily. And so just as an example, breast cancer, well, that was a mammogram. Most of you have heard about that one. That goes back to the 1960s. Cervical cancer, you probably heard about the Pap smear in the 1960s. Prostate cancer, that's the PSA, 1988. Colon cancer, colonoscopy, you've heard about that. And lung cancer, the CT scan. And there are others. So every so often, not all at once, science was able to make a breakthrough discovery about a way of detecting cancer earlier. If you detected it earlier, needless to say, it gave science many more options in terms of how to beat back the disease. When our charity was pretty early in its evolution, let's say 2003, we found ourselves kind of embroiled in debates about the early detection of cancer. We were mainly there to provide counsel to patients who were finding that the disease really put them on a roller coaster in terms of their emotions, and we were there as someone to talk to. But every so often, we went a little far afield, and in this example, in 2003, a fellow who was a very prominent doctor at New York Hospital, Nasser Al-Turki, arrived in Sag Harbor with a couple other buddies, and they were going to bang the drum about something called a CT scan, which no one had ever heard about. CT scan turned out to be a mechanism, describe it in a minute, that would be able to spot small nodules on your lung that were sometimes called suspicious findings, or said otherwise, the very, very early first stages of lung cancer. There was great debate over whether Nasser's theory, made any sense, whether they found people earlier and so forth. And right around the time that he was going to lecture to some of our folks in Sag Harbor, the National Cancer Institute put together a study of 50,000 heavy smokers, and half of them were examined with x-rays for a couple of years, and half of them were examined with CT scans for a couple of years. And at the end of that 2-year period, what was found was that the folks who had been examined with the CT scan, their early stage cancer was spotted or detected more frequently by far than that of folks who had nothing but an X-ray. So, when we got together out on the dock in Sag Harbor, there were, the winds of change, if you will, were kind of blowing, and it was a very exciting day to be in the Bay Street Theater. All 300 seats were full. I used to say it was sold out, but of course, all the seats were free of charge. But it was an exciting day, and it stuck with me. And another 10 or 15 years later, the topic came up in a very unusual kind of way, which was my wife started coughing. And this was now more like 2015 than 2003, some 12 years later. And I mean, she was really coughing. And I said, Wendy, is there any chance you have lung cancer? I mean, that's a hell of a cough. And of course, she said, no, not me. And I said, well, do you remember that thing, 10 some years ago when Fighting Chance was just starting out? We had that scientist out on the wharf talking to people about a CT scan. And why don't you have a CT scan? It can't kill you. And of course, I'm not sick. I don't need to. Anyway, she did. She had a CT scan. It took all of a half an hour. It's basically a fancy X-ray. And we sat down with our doctor the next week, and he said, Wendy, you may not believe this, but there's some very suspicious findings that we're seeing in this CT scan, and you just might have yourself a case of lung cancer. Well, of course, you can imagine if you're the spouse or if you were in the shoes of Wendy, those kinds of words, you have lung cancer. I mean, that just stops you in your tracks. Your life just stops for a minute. But in any event, we kind of regrouped. And because I'd been part of Fighting Chance and understood that world of cancer and cancer diagnoses, we said, well, what can we do now, Doc? He said, well, the next step is something called a fine needle biopsy. I'm going to take a needle that's about 8 inches long, and I'm going to stick it, Wendy, right in the middle of your chest, right through your chest wall, and I'm going to go looking with a guided mechanism for that spot in your lung that we think might be cancerous. And in the needle goes, and it finds a little piece of tissue, and out the needle comes, and that tissue goes right onto the slide of a pathologist, and under a microscope, lo and behold, Wendy has stage 1 cancer. At that point, of course, I'm feeling like I'm a genius, but I'm also feeling, my God, now what do we do? It turned out, because it was found so early, I mean, almost microscopic, the doctors, were able to go in and extract or resect that little piece of tissue that was the lung cancer. My wife did not have to have follow-on chemo or follow-on radiation. It was just, boom, we've got it. Go on with the rest of your life. So that's just an example of the kinds of things we did at Fighting Chance, the kinds of benefits that were generated, and that's just, I think, a nice story. There's that music again, which means we're coming to the end of this podcast. By all means, first of all, visit our website, fightingchance.org. At the top of the homepage, you'll see a podcast button. Press it, and you can gain access to this podcast and all the other podcasts that we've prepared. The homepage also lets you click through to other services of Fighting Chance, which are available to residents of the East End of Long Island. For example, there is counseling appointments to help patients get through the highs and lows during the battle with cancer. There are free local taxis to get you to cancer-related doctor appointments on the South Fork. There are free Hampton Jitney tickets if you need to see a specialist in New York City, such as Memorial Sloan Kettering. And there's also a free local resource guide, about 25 pages, that we produce in partnership with the American Cancer Society. If you have any questions about what we've discussed in this podcast, please email them to admin@fightingchance.org, and we will try to get back to you individually or answer your inquiry in the next podcast. Oop, there's that music again. Time to go. Hope you tune in again to Cancer Simplified, brought to you by Fighting Chance.